Ross Greenwood. Now, surely New South Wales should perhaps try this approach to get some of the money that they're owed by Queensland, $40 million that they paid for all the Queenslanders to come through Sydney hotel quarantine. It's a bit richer, Palaszczuk, isn't it?
Oh, well, it is a bit rich, and there's a couple of things here that you really need to break down. Number one is quite clearly, while you've got movie stars and sports stars and business people moving into hotel quarantine, happily paying the money because they can afford it, for some poor punter who literally has got a family member who's ill or who's dying and who actually needs to come back to Australia or has to go overseas to care for that person and then come back and go into the hotel quarantine, clearly their ability to be able to afford this is significantly diminished as compared with, the movie stars of this world. And so this is where it's a bit rich of the Palaszczuk government to be really, on one hand, really allowing New South Wales to carry the burden of those people coming to hotel quarantine, but then going out and chasing people aggressively in this way. And look, I know their debts, and I know it's been well publicised that that's what you've got to pay, and you've got a choice as to whether you do or go overseas. But of course, when it comes to matters of life and death and families, a lot of these people don't have a choice. And so as a result, really the Queensland government, like all state governments, have probably got to cut some slack for some people, I would have thought.
Well, you'd want to hope so, but we also know people were on planes to Darwin and to Queensland, and only when the plane landed and the rules had changed were they told that they'd enter quarantine. Terry, we know that there's about 25,000 people in Victoria that copped all those fines during that great lockdown last year. They haven't paid them either.
Well, indeed, Peter. I agree with Ross absolutely. And the thing about hotel quarantine, it's really an extension of obviously the state of emergency in tackling the virus, and people are being compensated for the costs that have to be paid. And the same thing exactly applies in the case of the hotel quarantine issue. And it gets very murky, as Ross has indicated, when New South Wales was stepping up, taking most of the burden of overseas entry, and the states, Queensland and Victoria, were able to sort of pick and choose how much burden they would accommodate. But in relation to the fines in Victoria, well, the whole thing was so absurd, and the extent of the brutality in terms of government mandation was ridiculous. Good luck to the state government to try and chase those fines down.
I want to pick up something today too that's emerged in the media. It'll be the first of many, I suspect. Big insurance claims by businesses. One of the big pubs down here in Melbourne, in St Kilda, people will know the iconic Espy. It's launched a multi-million-dollar claim after being shut down during the COVID outbreaks last year and into this year. 4 insurers are being targeted by the group of 9 pubs who say someone's got to pay for the huge downturn in their trade. As I said, Terry, won't be the last.
Well, no, Peter, but unfortunately they're aiming at the wrong target, because clearly the people that should be targeted are the state government in the unnecessary and excessive lockdowns, but also obviously being the cause of the reason to have them in the first place, which was the gross mismanagement of hotel quarantine, which then fed into aged care. But obviously they can't target the state government because the state government, like everything in this space, has protected itself. It's protected public servants from the effect of lockdowns. The private sector bore the burden. And in the case of the costs, the private sector again bears the cost, both directly in terms of traders like these hotels and the insurance companies that they are now seeking to get compensation from. Now, unfortunately, I think they're going to have a hard road to row, but clearly it's going to be a contractual issue and it's going to be resolved on that basis.
All right, help me understand this one, Ross. 1 in 10 Australians are now millionaires, according to a new study. Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report says Australians boosted their wealth more than any other country aside from Switzerland. The Millionaire Club set to expand by 70% to 3 million people over the next 5 years. How have Aussies done so well out of COVID, Ross?
Well, welcome to the world where, you know, federal and state governments spend $400 billion in a year. Welcome to the world where your interest rates are just about zero and you can borrow at 1% for a loan. Welcome to the world where people understand that they can actually make money out of their houses, and that's where most Australians have made their money. And welcome also to the world where the Reserve Bank actually controls the level of the Australian dollar, because if our Australian dollar had gone even higher, we would have been wealthier again in comparison to these other nations. So the reason why is because there is so much stimulus, because the throttle is so wide open, because governments and the Reserve Bank are refusing even to taper that at this stage. Australians are getting wealthier at the fastest rate on record. The only thing is, at some point down the track, they're going to have to pay a price for this. And I don't know whether many Australians are even conscious of that price that they will have to pay, but at some stage, they'll have to pay.